that the ceasefire agreement was brokered by the United States and involved it didn't involve Hezbollah. The last time I checked, Lebanon wasn't fighting Israel. Israel was bombing Lebanon, but Lebanon wasn't fighting Israel. There's been zero engagement between the Lebanese army and the Israeli Defense Force, which is invading Lebanese soil. It's sort of shocking that the Lebanese army is missing in action. The people fighting the Israelis are Hezbollah. And is Hezbollah a party? This is the big question. Is Hezbollah a party to this arrangement? What does this mean? A ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon? Does this mean that Israel will be allowed to continue to attack Hezbollah? And what are the obligations of the Lebanese army during this time? Are they going to be called upon to disarm Hezbollah? This is just a typical Trump act of stupidity. It has no relationship with reality. It allows him to put out the stupid tweet that he did today that he's a 10th war that he has stopped. But until, Hezbollah gets what people tend to forget, that Israel is illegally occupying Lebanese territory. Hezbollah is not invading Israel. Hezbollah is defending Lebanon, the mission that should be assumed by the Lebanese military, which, as I said before, is missing in action. So it's a confused situation. I don't think this is the way the United States could negotiate something like this without dealing with Iran directly. And if that's the workaround, if there's a lot of winks and nods and secret understandings, then maybe they'll have a 10-day ceasefire. But if this is, the United States acting unilaterally without coordinating with Hezbollah directly or indirectly, I don't think the ceasefire is going to hold, because Israel is Israel, and they are illegally occupying a significant portion of Lebanon.
Yeah, and as we've seen, when's the last time Israel actually respected a ceasefire and didn't violate it every single day? So it's hard when we get this announcement and we almost kind of have to go, okay, is this even going to hold up? Is this going to be worth the paper it's written on? And as you have that happening, you also have all of this talk about a second round of talks in Islamabad between the US and Iran. And you look at this and you go, okay, well, if there is a ceasefire in Lebanon, then it's a potential that we could see more talks between the US and Iran, because that was one of Iran's key demands. But when you look at what the US is actually doing here, they are moving more troops to the Middle East. They're moving another aircraft carrier. You even got Russia's Security Council warning that the US could be using this ceasefire to prepare for some kind of a ground invasion. So do you think that it seems as though the U.S. is preparing for more war? Does it seem as though Trump is looking for an off-ramp here? How do you see it?
Well, first of all, the numbers of troops that are being deployed to the Middle East are not sufficient to carry out an effective ground operation. If the goal and objective of Central Command is to commit suicide, then I guess they're doing okay. But there's insufficient troops to do anything serious at all. Another aircraft carrier is meaningless. What is the United States going to do? Bomb more buildings? And what buildings are they going to bomb? It's be curious to see what their target deck is, because one would think that all the priority targets have already been struck by the United States in previous campaigns. The bottom line is we don't know what we're bombing. We have no clue what we're bombing. We're not bombing anything of value. We've accomplished nothing in Iran except blowing up empty buildings and killing civilians. We've had zero impact on Iran's ability to carry out its core deterrence posture, which is ballistic missile and drone launch. We have not interdicted these at all in any meaningful fashion. This is why the war came to an end, because we weren't able to stop Iran. Iran was getting stronger, and Iran had done a very effective job of striking American targets, of Israeli targets, and Gulf Arab nation targets. And there was nothing anybody could do to stop the Iranians from continuing this. Iran had full control of the Strait of Hormuz, and there wasn't anything we could do to take that away from them. And we couldn't even make a secret grab for Iran's nuclear material, because that ended up with a Desert One type debacle in an agricultural airfield, a couple dozen kilometers southwest of Isfahan. So, what are we going to do? Continue failing? Because we don't have a plan. We have no idea what we're doing. We're sending troops to do what? A brigade of 82nd Airborne. Do you know how quickly they will die? Where's the backup? They're seizing an airfield to do what? How are you going to get mechanized forces deployed there? Where are they going to offload? Where are they going to come from? I mean, nothing's happening of significance. This is all posturing. This is all show. Um, I believe the United States has reached the maximum, uh, you know, effort in terms of their escalatory ladder using conventional warfare. There's nothing more we can do. If we continue this conflict, we just continue to fail. And it's an embarrassment. This is why we asked for the ceasefire. Iran didn't ask for the ceasefire. We asked for the ceasefire. We need the ceasefire. Iran doesn't need the ceasefire. China put pressure on Iran because China needs a ceasefire. China needs oil. And so they put the pressure on Iran, but Iran was ready to keep going. They're winning. Why not keep going? They're getting they're doing what they wanted to do. They didn't want this war, but they said if it starts, we know what needs to be done to finish it. And they were doing it. So I think what we're looking at is a situation where Donald Trump has postured to his base, because this is more about politics. This is about national security. This is all about Donald Trump's viability as a presidential leader going into critical midterm elections and what the legacy of the Trump presidency will be. There's a chance that the Republican Party will get swept in the House, which means Trump's legacy he'll finish up 2 years being impeached every day of the week. If he loses the Senate, sufficient numbers, he can be impeached and convicted. Donald Trump doesn't want this. Donald Trump wants to be seen as the greatest president that ever walked the face of the earth. And so Donald Trump needs to get out of this disaster that he created. But he has to get out of it in a way that allows him to spin it to make it look like he accomplished something. So that's what I think is taking place. The two sticking points I think that are going to emerge is that Iran will be allowed to retain limited enrichment capability, but will undertake actions that permanently curtail their ability to enrich to higher levels and limit the amount of materials. And there might even be a moratorium on enrichment. I think the United States will end up taking that deal. And then Donald Trump gets to say what he always said: I got a better deal than Barack Obama's JCPOA, which it would be a better deal from a standpoint of, blocking a theoretical pathway to a nuclear weapon. And the other one will be the revenue stream out of the tariffs imposed by Iran right now, the tolling imposed. This will become a shared revenue stream. How it's broken down is probably the finer negotiating point. But, the Iranians, even though they have possession, they actually don't hold the strongest cards, especially if you're a nation that believes in international law and you want international law complied with. The Strait of Hormuz is international waterways. There's supposed to be unrestricted access. And for Iran to suddenly claim territorial possession of this ownership puts them in opposition to the very international laws they insist the rest of the world complies with. So what I do think is that Iran will enter into an agreement, a treaty relationship between the United States and Gulf Arab states that allows it to, for a period of time, have de facto control over the strait, charge these tolls, but the revenues will be shared, and there'll be no restrictions of this. This is a security guarantee for Iran. Iran must be able to tighten down on the Strait of Hormuz at any time other nations fail to comply. But having the United States involved as well in the revenue stream is also a security guarantee because, the United States wants to keep that income flow going. So I think these are the two areas that we have a lot of technical discussions taking place. People need to understand that although the major players aren't in Islamabad, there's an American negotiating team and an Iranian negotiating team in there right now working nonstop to hammer out these technical details. If Professor Morandi was correct, and I always assume he is because he's an honest man, they were this close to signing a deal, the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. And when J.D. Vance walked away, I think there's a deal ready to be signed. We just need a political climate that is favorable to the President of the United States for that deal to be signed. Because right now, void of such a climate, it would look like an American surrender. And he needs to find a way to spin it into an American success.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if he can do that. And when it comes to the political climate, exactly as you're describing it, I know that one of the sticking points from the day of talks that we had in Islamabad were all of these calls coming in, some of which were coming from Netanyahu, because of course Netanyahu has been desperate for a war with Iran. And I know that there's a lot of concern still there about the role that Israel would play, right? Even if the US is in a position where Trump can say, oh, we made this deal, right? We got these points figured out, everything's good, I got a better deal. You still have Netanyahu over in his ear. And I know that there is still concern that Israel gets desperate, that they carry out some sort of a nuclear attack, that they escalate this war severely. Where do your concerns stand there? And how do you see the Trump administration and its ability to exert control and say, no, this is how it's going to be, you're going to listen, and this is how we're able to move forward?
Well, I've always been concerned about the level of control that Israel enjoys over American national security and foreign policy making, indeed American domestic policy as well. The pro-Israeli lobby has an iron grip on this administration. I can't explain why President Trump has yielded to the extent that he has to this lobby. There's a lot of speculation out there about control and leverage and stuff. I don't know. But what I do know is that he has surrounded himself with people who carry out a pro-Israeli agenda in a very aggressive fashion. But even these pro-Israeli agenda, facilitators were opposed to this war. I mean, Marco Rubio said that regime change was a fantasy. So did the CIA director. We know that General Kane felt that the Israelis were overselling their the ease to which they would be able to overthrow the regime. Most people believe that the Israelis, that this was unrealistic, that this was a war that shouldn't take place. J.D. Vance was dead set against it. But Donald Trump, on February 11th, received a special briefing from Benjamin Netanyahu and the head of the Mossad. And he overrode the concerns of his cabinet and took the nation to war. The question now is, do the Israelis, now that everything the Israelis sold him turns out to be fake news, what kind of leverage do they still have on this guy? Because he has the ability now to tell the Israelis, we gave you your shot. We did everything you asked us to do. And you failed. You promised X, Y, and Z. You didn't get anywhere close to that. And now we're paying the consequences of this. And we need to bring this thing to an end. What do the Israelis have to say about that? Trust us. We know what we're doing. Trust us. We've got an answer. They don't have an answer. And so it comes down to whether or not Israel retains sufficient leverage over this presidency to get him to, continue implementing policies that have been proven to be failures and have no chance of success. Whether he can declare independence is the unanswered question. Logic says that he should declare independence. There's no reason to continue to adhere to this Israeli plan. It failed, and it's not going to succeed. But again, we come down to whether or not the Israelis have, some, foundational leverage over this president in whatever way, shape, and form that may, that may appear. We don't know. We don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and that's got to be the scary part as you're watching all of this play out. Now, when it comes to kind of where all of this leaves us, right? I know that the U.S. has lost hundreds of millions of dollars in drones, fighter jets, radar equipment, the list goes on and on. We've now got to come in and rebuild all of these military bases in the Middle East. And you look at the US and you go, are you better off? I mean, yeah, you went in, you took out Iran's leader, you gave the country a rally around the flag effect. Now the Iranian people are more united than ever before in standing against you. You gave Iran even more control over the Strait of Hormuz than it would have exercised otherwise. How do you view the position that the U.S. is in? And do you think that the U.S. establishment has learned any lessons from this? Are we going to do anything differently when it comes to future ventures against other countries, namely China?
Well, China is the big question. I mean, this is an absolute failure in the Middle East. But there's the potential to unravel this because Iran, for the first time in 5 decades, has the potential of having all sanctions lifted from its economy. And therefore, the Iranian leadership will be in a position to deliver on promises made to the Iranian people about, a better life. And that's very attractive for the Iranians. So there's a potential for compromise solutions that get the Iranians where they need to be. But the problem is this war has resonated far beyond simply the Persian Gulf or West Asia. In 2025 November, the Trump administration published their national security strategy document, and it made a big deal about the United States making the Pacific a priority. And we said what we need to do in the Pacific is contain the Chinese, and the way to contain the Chinese is to make sure that we have conventional military overmatch so that the Chinese know they can't win a fight against the United States. Now, that was problematic in 2025 to say that, but today it's insane. They think anything that the United States retains anything. We have, the key to overmatch wasn't just America's military superiority, but the fact that this military superiority, at least what we deemed to be military superiority, was linked to alliance relationships that, gave us the ability to, draw a net around China. Let's look at those relationships now. The tripartite agreement between the United States, Japan, and South Korea. We've stripped all the air defense away from these people that we promised. We brought them together saying North Korea's missiles are a problem. You need us to help you build this air defense, and we need to be ready to take on the North Koreans. And then we strip away all of their air defense, send it to Israel. Economically, we get them in a situation where, Japan, I think it's 93% of their energy needs come from the Middle East. They're not getting fulfilled. So Japan's, going into, energy security meltdown. South Korea, I think it's 40 some odd percent. Again, they're not getting it. So from the South Korean and Japanese perspectives, the United States is an unreliable ally in terms of military defense, and is absolutely devastating ally when it comes to energy security and economic security, because the United States abandoned them, set them up for failure, and hasn't done anything to alleviate the needs. So there goes that. Now we can go down further. Got AUKUS, Australia, United Kingdom, U.S. This is the arrangement that emerged after the United States and the Australians conspired to screw France and tell the French they're not selling these submarines. And so the United States stepped in and promised nuclear submarine technology. We can get a whole different story about how that's not doing so well. But the point is, you have AUKUS, which is supposed to be focused on, securing the South Pacific from China with these submarines, the British, the Americans, and now the Australians and their submarine force. Well, the British are out. They don't trust America to begin with. Starmer's made that clear. They don't trust Trump. And Australia's done. I mean, they don't have any energy. It's a big country. But to get, say, from Darwin to Melbourne, let's say some container ships land in Darwin. To get that stuff to Melbourne, you have to go on a road. They have giant trucks, and those trucks run on diesel. There is no more diesel in Australia, which means trucks aren't driving, goods aren't being shipped, which means that there's empty, shelves in stores. This is the reality of Australia. They're going through quite an emergency crisis right now. To make matters work, the second largest refinery, there's only two, is on fire, and they're not able to produce refined petroleum products right now. So, Australia's out, the United Kingdom's out, so there is no AUKUS. Then we got the Quad. That's another one of those things that the Americans set up with the Japanese, the Indians, the Australians, and America. We got the Quad. I already said the Japanese are out, Australia's out, so now we got the duo, India and the United States. And India's like, we need energy that you're threatening us with. India got screwed by the United States. If you remember, the United States put pressure on India to stop buying Russian oil. And so some Indian companies stopped buying Russian oil. And then the war came along, and they were desperate for energy, and now they have to buy Russian oil. But instead of getting it at, $20, $30 a barrel, they're paying full market value for it. So it's destroying India's economy. But India needs energy security. The United States isn't providing it. So there goes the Quad. The Pacific is our alliance structure in the Pacific is non-existent. Then we can throw in Taiwan, because Taiwan's sort of the center of it all. That's the center of gravity. How do we protect Taiwan's interest? How do we get Taiwan to be independent? How do we use Taiwan as leverage against China? And, Taiwan's in the midst of passing a $40 billion emergency supplemental defense expenditure because they need it to stand up to China. Except the Taiwanese now are going, wait a minute, what? You want us to buy air defense systems that don't work? China's got a whole bunch of missiles, more missiles than Iran, better missiles than Iran, and we don't have air defenses that work because our air defenses are similar to the ones that the Israelis use that don't work. Is this really a good idea to provoke the dragon? We're buying a whole bunch of other equipment, but that sort of predicated on the idea that you're going to be able to come over on your ships and offload and help us out, but you're not going to get anywhere near because the missiles are going to stop you and you're going to run away like you ran away from the Iranians. So the Taiwanese are sort of in a quandary here. So they send the head of the opposition party, Miss Chang, with the Kuomintang, flies over, meets with Xi Jinping, the president of China. And they have a wonderful conversation. She does a tour, and the whole idea is she's saying we can live together in peace. She's pushing the peace agenda to try and disrupt this $40 billion emergency supplemental. And it's just curious what happened here because, China's been pushing one China policy. And then they have another one, which is two systems, one government, or something like that. These are the big talking points. But the original was the 1992 understanding, a consensus. That's the original one. And the ruling party right now, the Democratic People's Party, I guess, in Taiwan, they canceled. Said we won't even talk about that. That's the only thing Chang and Xi talked about. They didn't talk about one China. They didn't talk about one man, two systems. They talked about the 1992 consensus, because that's the agreement that was originally reached between Kuomintang and the Communist Party of China. So they're back to basics, which is fascinating. And then the other thing that happened is recognizing the political sensitivities. Xi Jinping backed out from a joint statement, and he allowed Chang to make a unilateral statement, meaning she gets to define how she wants to sell this. China wouldn't put any pressure on her, and she sold it very strongly in terms of looking for peaceful outcomes. And Xi Jinping was happy with what he said, so immediately afterwards, things start happening in terms of deals and things like that. So Taiwan's not playing the Trump war game either. That's specific. We lost the Pacific because of Iran. Europe's gone. Europe's finished. We're out of Europe. They don't want to have anything to do with us. They hate us. They despise us. Europe's desperately looking to find how to create a NATO without America, because not only is it that America doesn't want to play anymore, but Europe's saying we don't want you to play. I mean, there's just more harm to Europe than not by having America as an unreliable ally. The problem is Europe is not in a place to replace the United States. They don't have the economy to do it. They don't have the defense industry to do it. They don't have the leadership to do it. But that's the direction they're moving. So Europe's history. So we lost Europe. We lost the Pacific. And we also lost the notion of the invincibility of the American military. So Trump's in a lot of trouble. This war has done a lot of harm to the United States.
And you would think that they would have learned something from their proxy war against Russia, right? Because everything that you're describing there, it's like we could have learned so many lessons from the war in Ukraine, looking at the position that the U.S. is in, looking at the U.S. overselling itself and trying to get into another one of these endless wars and not taking into account who they are going up against. The last thing I wanted to bring up, when it comes to what you're keeping an eye on in the days to come, especially as we now have, what's supposed to be 2 ceasefires ongoing, possible talks in Islamabad, what are you going to be keeping an eye on here when it comes to this overall conflict?
Islamabad. I think, again, I could be wrong, because we're in the predictive analysis business, and who knows? Trump has been very unpredictable, but I think the United States has maxed out its escalation capabilities. Politically, Trump's in a lot of trouble, and continuing a war that can't be won, just continuing failure upon failure upon failure, isn't good politics. It'll be harmful to Gulf Arab states. It'll be harmful to U.S.-European relations. It'll be extraordinarily harmful to the Pacific. Trump can't keep up the charade of a successful blockade forever. Eventually, people are going to be asking questions like, why are all the ships leaving Iran and going everywhere they want to go in the world with all the energy they want to bring? questions the Trump administration doesn't want to answer because they're claiming that they are very successful in this blockade. Uh, I think we're looking at a peace deal. I think the peace deal has been largely hammered out, and I'll be looking at Islamabad. I'll be looking at delegations being prepared to go to Islamabad to do this. This doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out affair with the technical teams and their working. The deal can be pretty much done, faxed to the appropriate people, and they just show up for a one-day signing ceremony and get the hell out of there. This is what I'm looking at. I'm not too concerned about the deployment of American military forces into the region because it's insufficient to actually move the needle at all when it comes to, being able to compel Iran to do anything. I think that the Trump administration knows that it has to get a settlement.